The company that won Best Startup for disrupting food delivery was running a secret cartel called Project Harmony. Delivery Hero and Glovo agreed not to steal each other's employees, split Europe's markets between themselves, and kept it going for 4 years. The European Commission charged them €329 million for cooperating too well. I break down Europe's biggest corporate fines every week. Subscribe if you want to understand how billion-euro punishments actually work. Delivery Hero's minority stake in Glovo would later become the exact thing that exposed their entire operation. But in 2018, it looked like nothing more than a smart bet. Delivery Hero was a Berlin-based food delivery giant operating in over 70 countries, founded by Niklas Östberg in 2011. Glovo was the scrappy Barcelona startup founded 4 years earlier by Oscar Pierre and Sasha Michaud, two entrepreneurs who built a multi-category delivery app that was growing faster than almost anything else in European tech. By the time the investment happened, Glovo held leading positions in 16 of its 25 markets and was being celebrated in the press as one of Southern Europe's great tech success stories. When Delivery Hero bought a minority stake that year, it looked like standard venture capital logic. Back a rising competitor, hedge your bets, maybe acquire them later. The deal valued Glovo at €2.3 billion on a fully diluted basis. But it gave Delivery Hero something worth more than the financial return. It gave them a representative on Glovo's board of directors. That representative could sit in rooms where Glovo discussed pricing strategy, hiring plans, and which cities to expand into next. Two companies that millions of customers across Europe believed were fighting each other for market share now shared a boardroom table. Niklas Östberg oversaw a delivery empire spanning 70 countries and thousands of employees. Oscar Pierre ran Glovo across 25 markets, with over 3,000 staff and 15,000 riders in Spain alone. Both men had every incentive to avoid expensive competition with each other, and that incentive would prove impossible to resist. They called it a strategic investment. Brussels would eventually call it something else entirely. They gave the arrangement a name, Project Harmony. And Project Harmony had 3 simple rules that would cost them a combined €329 million. Rule 1 was the most direct. Neither company would recruit or hire the other's employees. Managers received explicit instructions. An internal email thread with the subject line, HR coordination, laid out the terms in plain language. No poaching, no surprises. A recruiter at either company who reached out to talent at the other would be told to stop. Rule 2 was subtler but equally illegal. The companies exchanged commercially sensitive information that competitors are forbidden from sharing. Pricing data, commercial strategies, expansion timelines, and market analysis flowed between Berlin and Barcelona through emails, Slack channels, and shared folders on Google Drive. Delivery Hero's board seat made this trivially easy. They could see Glovo's plans in real time and adjust their own accordingly. Rule 3 carved up Europe like a map in a war room. A shared spreadsheet titled Expansion Territories 2020 through 2022 listed cities and regions assigned to each company. Glovo would not enter Delivery Hero's strongest markets. Delivery Hero would stay out of Glovo's core territories. The result was 0 overlap, 0 price wars, and 0 expensive battles for customers. 3 rules documented in writing, coordinated through messaging apps, and maintained across the entire European Economic Area for 4 straight years. And somehow, nobody outside the arrangement caught on. They called it Project Harmony. €329 million worth of harmonizing. The effects radiated across an entire continent without anyone understanding the source. Thousands of software engineers, operations managers, data scientists, and delivery workers across Europe found themselves unable to move between 2 of the industry's biggest employers. Recruiters in the food delivery space noticed the freeze as early as 2019. Cross-hiring between Delivery Hero and Glovo simply stopped. Applications went unanswered. Headhunters were told certain candidates were off-limits without explanation, but nobody could point to a documented reason. Industry observers chalked it up to corporate rivalry or informal non-compete clauses. Market analysts published reports wondering why neither company seemed to expand aggressively into the other's core territories, even when the economics clearly favored it. The consensus was that it was strategic focus, reasonable caution, rational behavior from 2 companies that simply preferred different markets. Behind the scenes, it was none of those things. It was a spreadsheet and a gentleman's agreement, enforced through board-level access and maintained by executives who believed they would never be caught. Workers who wanted to advance their careers by switching platforms discovered an invisible wall that nobody would acknowledge existed. One anonymous Glovo software engineer would later tell reporters that they always wondered why recruiter friends called it impossible to move between the 2 companies. Now they finally understood. They were pawns in someone else's game, and the game had been running for years. An invisible wall stretched across the entire European Economic Area, from Lisbon to Helsinki. 4 years of restricted mobility for thousands of people who never knew the barrier was there. Then on a morning in 2023, the explanation arrived uninvited at Glovo's Barcelona headquarters. European Commission investigators and Spanish police walked through the front doors carrying inspection decisions signed in Brussels. The reception staff barely had time to alert the legal team before the investigators split into groups. One team headed straight for the server rooms with forensic imaging equipment. Another went to executive offices and began collecting devices. Laptops were seized from desks. Company servers were forensically copied using write-blocking hardware that preserved every byte of data in its original state. Slack channels, WhatsApp conversations, and email archives were extracted using specialized forensic software capable of recovering messages that employees thought they had deleted. Startled employees watched as their devices were catalogued and bagged. A second wave of raids hit both companies on November 21st of the same year, this time targeting Delivery Hero's offices in Berlin, alongside additional Glovo locations across Europe. What the investigators pulled from those devices confirmed everything the Commission had suspected. The internal communications referenced Project Harmony by name, in plain text, with no attempt at disguise. The HR coordination email thread spelled out the hiring restrictions in language so direct it barely needed legal interpretation. The market allocation spreadsheet existed exactly as suspected, with cities neatly divided between the two companies in color-coded columns. Chat logs between executives casually discussed keeping the market clean and avoiding unnecessary wars, as though dividing a continent's labor market were a routine operational matter. Executives at two of Europe's most celebrated tech companies had documented their illegal coordination in writing, in group chats with timestamps, for 4 straight years. The one thing they forgot to coordinate was what to do when someone finally came looking. Commissioner Rivera stood at the podium in Brussels on June 2, 2025, and delivered a statement that rewrote the rules of European competition law. This was the first time in the Commission's history that it had sanctioned a labor market cartel. The total fine was €329 million. Delivery Hero owed €223 million. Glovo owed €106 million. Both companies chose the settlement procedure immediately. They admitted the infringement in full, accepted responsibility for their participation, and waived their right to appeal the decision. In exchange, each company received the standard 10% reduction in fines. Rivera's words at the press conference were measured but unmistakable. Today, we find Delivery Hero and Glovo a total of €329 million for participating in a cartel in the online food delivery sector. This is the first time the Commission has sanctioned a cartel in the labor market. Our decision sends a clear message. We will not tolerate companies colluding to restrict competition for talent or to allocate markets. She then added one observation that cut straight to the architecture of the scheme. Owning a stake in a competitor is not illegal in itself, but it may be problematic when that stake is used to gain insight, information, and influence decisions in ways that can harm competition. Delivery Hero spent years perfecting their cooperation. The Commission spent months dismantling it entirely. As of today, both companies have paid the full fine amount. No appeals were filed because the settlement procedure made that legally impossible. Glovo's Italian arm is now under judicial supervision for separate labor violations involving thousands of riders who were classified as independent contractors rather than employees. Both companies face ongoing regulatory scrutiny across multiple European countries, with compliance teams restructured from the ground up. But the case triggered something larger than a single fine. The European Commission issued new guidelines explicitly targeting labor market collusion, making clear that agreements restricting worker mobility carry the same legal consequences as traditional price-fixing cartels. National competition authorities across at least 10 European countries have since launched parallel investigations into similar arrangements in technology, logistics, and healthcare. The 2025 Annual Competition Report describes this case as a turning point in enforcement philosophy, stating that competition enforcement actively promotes inclusive labor markets by sanctioning cartels that restrict opportunities for workers. The anonymous software engineer, who could never switch companies, finally has an answer. The recruiter who hit an invisible wall finally knows who built it. And the company that won Best Startup for Innovation was quietly running the oldest trick in the Antitrust playbook the entire time. They just wrapped it in a nicer name and kept it in a group chat. Next week, a pharmaceutical giant thought it could pay competitors not to compete. The Commission disagreed by €875 million, and the fallout reshaped an entire industry